Hi everyone, it's Alex, and today I wanted to review two books that I read in April that I feel like really spoke to each other, and those are Eileen by Ottessa Moshfegh and The Pisces by Broder. Apart from both of these books giving me a large sense of anxiety, I do feel like they were talking about really important things about the concept of disappearing, as both of these characters in these books, we have Lucy from The Pisces and Eileen from Eileen. They're both women that are very headstrong about what it means to find connection between other people. And I think it's really interesting because we have Eileen that's placed in the 1960s, whereas we have Lucy that's in a much more modern place or timeline where it seems like every other page she's on Tinder. Speaking of Eileen first, from the very beginning we do know that Eileen sees herself as a very ordinary girl, and that she talks about already how she successfully disappeared. And it's very similar in the Pisces, where we have Lucy that talks about meaningful disappearance and the act of vanishing gracefully as she moves from Phoenix, Arizona to LA to move in with her sister temporarily to sort of escape the world that she's in being a PhD student. So already there's sort of these ingredients knowing immediately that both of these characters successfully already disappear. So you don't have to really spend the whole book kind of wondering whether or not they can succeed in that way. So immediately, for me at least, I was considering how can they grow internally and personally to really come to grips with how they want to sort of live their lives. I would then assume that in order to disappear successfully, that there are some things I came up with here, like decreasing dependency that I feel like Lucy and Eileen would need to do. With Eileen, it might be with her connection with her father that she hates because he's an alcoholic and she knows that she has to take care of him, as Eileen works in this juvenile detention center for young boys where she's a secretary. And then with Lucy, where I mentioned that she moves to LA to live with her sister, she's also responsible for taking care of her sister's cat. So beyond Lucy's sort of peril from this breakup she went through that caused her to move to LA, she still has to have responsibilities and obligations to where both Lucy and Eileen can't necessarily disappear completely. So understanding that there is this sense of physical disappearance by literally moving by location, with Eileen wanting to get out of Xville and Lucy now in LA, as well as this internal disappearance with realizing you have still these obligations to take care of. Now it's where it really sets in, where both Lucy and Eileen have their own sort of projections left to where they can sort of muster their personalities into other people. We quickly learn in the Pisces that Lucy can't seem to let go of physical intimacy, specifically with being with men and primarily getting over her breakup, but we do know that she obsesses over this mysterious man on the beach that she gets to know in a very private sense, to where she literally isn't allowed to tell people about their developing relationship. And with Eileen, we know that she has this same sense of privacy, of intimacy with physical desire or projection, where she obsesses over her male coworker even to the point of stalking him and visiting his house. So both Lucy and Eileen create these safe mental spaces where they can have these fantasies about their desires that they know has to be secrets, and which sort of keeps them from fully growing as people. With these relationships keeping them tethered from completely disappearing, it might lead you to believe, or at least what I questioned while reading these books, about the concept of death and how death is introduced in both of these books quite interestingly. I would say that Eileen is much more brutal or less optimistic than Lucy when it comes to death, as Eileen does mention that she could die at any time, so why wouldn't she indulge herself in her fantasies even though they're all in her head? And we have Lucy, who has people that she befriends that have suicidal tendencies, and even instances, without spoiling anything, where Lucy is given the option of life or death. But ultimately, what seems to be piloting both Lucy and Eileen's life is their sense of disappointment. I felt like personally that Eileen didn't really approach or obsess over people that she knew she could immediately admire. It was really about who was the person that would most likely least disappoint her. Similarly with Lucy, whether or not she can distract herself from how she feels about disappointing herself, she quickly dates all of these men and realizes that they're not great. And it feels like this sense of disappointment creates a cognitive dissonance where I think Eileen and Lucy are trying to retreat from understanding their own potential and capability for living a very proactive and positive life, considering that Eileen does manage to hold down her job and take care of her father, and with Lucy managing to be a PhD student and knock it out of the park academically. I do think Lucy and Eileen stray from the possibility of sort of looking inward and feeling disappointed about themselves. They would feel much more comfortable about being disappointed by others as if it's their fault. Because I think because of that, they're so afraid of becoming like the people they're disappointed in, primarily with Eileen afraid that she'll be like her father and stay at home and live in Xville, and Lucy afraid that she'll end up as being as bad as of a person as her ex-boyfriend thinks she is. I know that the Pisces and Eileen are both very polarizing works. I feel like you only ever really like them, or really like the book, or really don't. But I don't think that these characters ever necessarily ask for sympathy. I think instead they genuinely want people to sort of criticize them so they can really wonder about disappearing gracefully or being a good person. And I think it's because knowing that with each situation or something that they tackle, that that's an existence or evidence of their experience and being alive and how they can't disappear completely. Both endings to these books do have clear endings, although at the same time, they do acknowledge new beginnings or new possibilities for both Lucy and Eileen that are like clear as day. Like you'll really notice them when one thing is over and one is starting. And I think neither Lucy or Eileen feel quite prepared about their future, and that's okay. That's not to say that I would entirely say that I'm proud of Lucy or Eileen with certain actions they take in their own stories, but I do feel like sort of comparing what I've read previously, recently throughout this year or maybe the tail end of last year, I think of books like Outline by Rachel Cusk and Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, and I think about in a similar situation of how to disappear gracefully. I feel like in Convenience Store Woman, with our protagonist there, she was also disappearing but in a more healthy way through her work, and in Outline we had Faye, who is someone that disappeared through her career as well, and I feel like that books like The Pisces and Eileen are necessary to sort of understand what do we find socially acceptable as methods of feeling like we're normal. As we sort of garden our internal perception of our place in the world, I think you could even extend farther to say that I feel like even in these books, The Pisces and Eileen, both Lucy and Eileen talk about the qualities of men that they wish they had, to where they feel like it would be more appropriate to rationalize their actions if they were men. Historically, thinking of narratives with male protagonists and how they're allowed to sort of explore and venture out and discover themselves, I feel like that's what Lucy and Eileen are doing as well. Of course, I haven't read everything in the world, so I can't really like make that blanket claim, but I do think it's something to think about. If anything, I did find The Pisces and Eileen both highly entertaining. I'm glad it's something I read, or that these are books I've read that strongly made me think about something or feel a certain way, even if it was making me very anxious. If you've read both of these books, I would love to know what you think. If you haven't read them, I would like to know your initial impressions on them based on what you might have heard. Really quickly, I would also like to mention thank you for your questions and book recommendations so far in my last video. I'm probably going to answer those questions and then find out what my subscriber summer TBR would be by the beginning of June. So you're still welcome to leave recommendations and questions if you'd like. I'll also be trying to refilm my wrap-up soon. I haven't really liked how it's been turning out, so I'm going to keep trying. But as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.